My goodness, the big event we've been waiting for is about to arrive. Uranus is moving into Gemini, where it's going to be for the next 7 years. And there's a big energy shift coming. It's been happening. Things have been already shifting. We got a taste of this energy last summer, starting in, I think, around through the beginning of November. We had a taste of what was going to be happening with this Uranus energy in Gemini. And then it went back to Taurus to do some completion. I think one of the things we want to remember in these shifts of energy, one, this is a long transit. It's going to be 7 years. So not everyone's going to feel everything right at the beginning. It kind of depends on your rhythm, depends on where you are in your curriculum, depends on how sensitive you are. All of those things can be at play. I think some of us have been already feeling it. Definitely last summer, things began to shift for me, and the way I was creating has shifted. My work has kind of come into really clear focus in a way that it was maybe a little bit more diffuse, or I was backing out, waiting for someone else to do my work in certain ways. And you just become quite crystal clear, quite anchored since this shift. This also is going to have echoes of things that are rooted in other energetic aspects, rooted in other cosmic bodies, rooted in other parts of your own curriculum. This huge year of the fire horse, the completion of this 400-year cycle, all of those things are at play. And so, whenever we're looking at a particular transit or a particular aspect of the cosmic weather, it's not to say this is everything or this is the only thing that's happening. It is a moment of differentiation, though. So we might zoom in and have an opportunity to look through a particular lens and notice what might be there for us. Different aspects of cosmic weather, of transits, of energies, all those things, however you might look at it. Some will matter more to you than others, and that's always okay as well. So, with that said, I'm going to get started here. For me, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to talk about this shift from Uranus out of Taurus into Gemini is the nervous system. Uranus in Taurus was a really big aspect of nervous system work and understanding why all of a sudden we're all hearing about regulation and why before 2018, I would attempt to teach people nervous system work, trying to get people into down regulation before 2018 was just like pulling teeth. It was so difficult. Not many people were interested. Honestly, not people were interested in doing nervous system work or understanding anything about the regulation. And then things have really changed over the last 7, 8 years around nervous system. What Uranus and Taurus were asking, this energy was asking, that interplay between them was for the nervous system to take root in our reality, to come out of abstraction and for us to come into contact with it, for us to begin to come into contact with the body in a new way, contact with the nervous system in a new way, contact with the regulation in a new way, so that it's not just a concept that's sort of abstract, but that became something that we lived. And so you could just take a moment and notice how you've done that curriculum over the last 7, 8 years. It was also an ask for us to recognize that not everything in your life is going to be fixed with mindset. And there was an interesting shift in sort of the manifestation and even new age world. There was an explosion in kind of mindset, new age manifestation. And even through that, a kind of waking up to understand this is a little out of body. This is a little manipulative. This isn't quite at the truest level of frequency. There's a lot that happened inside of that. One of the biggest parts of the nervous system in Taurus that we were met with was beginning to understand safety. And even though it's still very misunderstood and mostly misrepresented, this idea of safety now became much more normalized. And it's not as foreign for people to understand the concept, at least in some version of nervous system safety. I don't think we did as fully as we needed to that work around safety. Taurus and Uranus was really saying, hey, I need you to learn to stay. I need you to learn to hold this. I need you to slow down and find yourself here and feel this, right? It was asking us to learn to stay and to feel and to experience and not to be so quick to switch the channel and not to be so quick to try and release something and not to be so processing only in the mental plane that we were leaving the body out, right? And some of us have been really taking that curriculum to heart because if we haven't learned to stay, if we haven't learned to hold, if we haven't learned to feel, then what comes next is going to be even harder. So we might actually still be doing some cleanup work over these next first phases, seasons, cycles as Uranus moves into Gemini. to learn to stay, to hold, and to feel. So Taurus and Uranus was saying, hey, you can't be so afraid of sensation in your body. You can't be so afraid to feel the things. We have to develop enough understanding of inner holding, the safety of inner holding, along with co regulation, right? But the safety of inner holding so that you can feel these things. What's going to happen as Uranus hits Gemini is now it's going to be like, great, you've learned to hold. Now you need to direct. Now you need to move it, right? So Gemini and Uranus will both be saying there will be lots more like move, impulse. And depending on where you are in that curriculum, that can get really messy, really, really messy. And things that may have happened is like if we're still really dissociated, or we're still working with transcendence, full of bypass, staying in the mind, and the mind controls everything, mental body control over everything, then this energy as it hits Uranus could totally just like warp speed you into massive chaos. And for some people that they're going to think that feels really good because they're going to stay really out of the body and really out of sensation. And the cost of that, though, the price that we're paying for that out of bodiness is huge. And the price that the world is paying for the disembodiment is huge, because when you're living at the level of your nervous system, a lot of the shit that happens out there would not be happening, because you can't do that level of harm to another system, to nature, to another body. You can't be that violent if you feel it in yourself, when you're feeling what you're doing to other people, when what you're doing to yourself, right? Gemini is going to ask for us to understand transformation and transmutation through that which has been held and felt and experienced and known. And that slow part of the feeling and the knowing has to happen before the fast part of the transformation and the transmutation. So, yes, the healing can take an instant. Yes, the transformation happens in a moment. All of those types of things are very true of Uranus and Gemini energy. But what's not available for actual transformation and transmutation is if it hasn't been held, felt, and experienced. And so that was the whole practice of Taurus, is like, can you stay? Can you become a system that feels and holds, right? So this is where the nervous system initiation gets real, right? Because if we're continuing to still bypass the body and we're continuing to stay out of sensation, we're not available for what the actual transformation or transmutation is, right? So Uranus in Taurus says, can you become a body that is safe enough to feel and to stay inside of your experience? Can you honor the experience that you're having? And Uranus in Gemini says, thank you for staying and feeling and experiencing that. Now I need you to organize it, translate, and direct that energy, direct that information, direct that stimulus. So if you haven't been inside the experience of the information, you can't direct it clearly. This is where the shadow of Gemini can totally take over. I think the biggest question that Gemini and Uranus over the next 7 years is going to ask us is, what do you believe it is to be fully human and wholly divine? And how is that going to get honored? Because we're going to really be confronted with the pathway of transhumanism, this continued pathway of dishonoring of the sacredness of life in the body. And there is a way that from the shadow side and the shallow side of Gemini, that's going to seem right on in this energy. It's going to be really supported to move quite quickly at an agenda to say the body doesn't matter, nature doesn't matter, naturalness doesn't matter, and, move towards this very technologically advanced society and system body, full of inputs and stuff. And very Borg like. If you're a Star Trek fan, you really can see the Borgness of this, of losing our humanity. But the beauty of the Gemini and Uranus, it also says, like, well, what is it to honor being fully human and wholly divine in this? So the information doesn't override the humanness, it gets moved through the human system. So what happens if you missed the learning of the nervous system in Taurus? Well, you're going to be signed up for double duty. You're going to be in this place where you have to build that container, that foundation that's needed, also while learning to, listen and translate and direct. And really our only options are to do the curriculum that's in front of us, or to get passed by, to become a casualty of our own evolution. And I think a lot of people are still acting as if you have an option for doing your curriculum, really laissez-faire and really complacent. And over the last 7 years, there was a lot of people waking up and a lot of people starting. people at the integration podium here in this season where you're like, as we're getting ready to cross into the next gate, there's like not a lot of people who've come all the way through their lessons and their curriculum. So this is a really big moment. This and really, the last 3 months have been this place. If you've again been ignoring the demands, the invitations to complete, to come into integration, to come into completion, to stop clinging, to let go, to empty out, to simplify, to essentialize, to become very clear in what no longer continues. You're signed up for double duty here. The last 7 years were about building a body that can hold sensation. How well are you doing that? How much do you still get caught up in everything being a problem, every sensation being meaning something's awful or something's wrong? Being able to stay, being able to really feel all the way through it, right? How much have you been ignoring the true physical healing and relationship with the body, the relationship with the soma, the relationship with the fascia, the nervous system that's been asked of you the last 7 years? How have you shown up for that curriculum? So we're at graduation time. Are you graduating from that? Or is there still more work that you need to do? You're never too late to do the work. There is an ask for you to live deeper and fuller and wiser than what we're conditioned to do, and then where the focus in the external world has been demanding and seemingly rewarding you for being. There's a whole aspect of life that many, many, many people are not engaged with. The reality. Many people are not engaged with reality. And so if you have not created a container with your body to be able to hold yourself and feel, let's start there. But it's also why this next aspect is about becoming a system that can translate the energy, translate the information, create through it. The only other option is that you will be used by information. You will be used by the system to be a place of input and output that you did not translate. And this is where the transhumanism is going to come in so clearly. And where we're already distorted and co-opted. We're already really corrupted in so many ways. This is a place where we have to double down in understanding. It's why it was so essential for me that Embody Your Intuition happened in this portal. Right now, understanding what is it to be a system that can stay, a system that can hold, and a system that can translate clearly. Discernment, so essential right now. And it was even why last summer, when the first opening of this energy, the Temple of Ash and Ember was born, and we did Oracle Circle, right? Those energies really starting to come through in the way that we're living and leading. Let's talk a little more about Gemini. It governs our synapses, our firing patterns. Gemini is about firing that energy through language, pattern recognition, interpretation. It's the bridge between inner experience and outer expression. Big Gemini work. So it's not just the air aspect of being mental, and Gemini is more about electrical communication. And so as we move into this new phase with Uranus, which is also about electricity, right? That there's this opportunity for new electrical communication. This is about new increased sensitivity to information, internal and external. This is about becoming more intuitive, rapid cycling through states, being able to shift states, harmonize states, metabolize, like really, really work with this body as the divining rod, as a harmonizer, as this huge technology that we're just barely kind of in. So the heightened intuition that is available in this Uranus and Gemini energy could also become heightened anxiety or heightened depression if that ground in Taurus was not built. So if you are ungrounded, if you don't have roots into your own sacred ground, then this energy is going to feel very difficult, and you're going to head towards anxiety or depression, depending what your system tends to go towards. So that is a call for the groundedness, for the landing, for the container, so that this energy can be directed, so the communication can be clear, so that the pathways can be open, so that you can be discerning and refining that in a really precise and powerful way. Taurus built the container, the ground, the foundation, and Gemini is all about testing the wiring, firing the synapses, sending the energy through the wires and seeing what's possible. The nervous system is no longer asked to just be in what we think about a regulation of bringing ourselves out of the stress states. We should be practiced at that at this point. And I know that's a big should that I just landed on the collective, but there we go. I just should it all over us. We should be practiced at this point about bringing ourselves out of stress states. There's been enough information around this. If you're not practiced at that, get practiced at it. practice down regulation every day, to practice discharging every day. Because if you can't do that, if you don't know how to pull your system back into center, then you can never become articulate at the fullness of you. You're just run by stress energy. You're just run by the threat response. And that's not a nuanced, articulate, specified system. That is not you being the embodiment of anything you're here to be. That is you being run by the information, the stimuli that your body's trying to take in and can't fully process. What you might have done over the last 7 years, instead of building a container, is actually add more armoring, bracing, and rigidity and called that safety or regulation. A lot of regulation work that's been out there has not been truly about creating this foundation that could be with and then metabolize, harmonize, and actually do the work of regulation. It's been this way of bracing and removing and protecting our peace, backing off of building the resiliency, holding the status quo. If that's been where your regulation work has been, then you've got a real call here to understand what it actually is to downregulate and discharge, to actually have a system that can move yourself out of those stress states. You really need to be able to return to center again and again and again. And we want to have been so practiced at that over the last 7 years that we're doing it quite autonomically now. If you are not practiced at that, that is where you start. You practice there, practice down regulation, practicing discharge, practicing returning to center. But that is not where we stay. That is the basic beginning. That is level 0, because where we're meant to be is understanding how to become articulate. Once we move the stress and the threat response, now there is space for true articulation from our soul, from us to be able to move the stimuli from the external, understand what's coming in from our divine self, having these things work together, and then us being able to create, to direct, to articulate in this realm what needs to be articulated, to create what needs to be created, to no longer be subservient and enslaved by the system, by the stress, by the threats of this world, but to understand how to work with that. Other things that may have happened over the last 7 years is that you mistranslated the invitation to slowness as a way that you got to stay stagnant, wait, and hold back. There has been, especially over the past 3 weeks, a little bit of stirring and agitation around those stagnation patterns, around those waiting and holding back. About 2 weeks ago, you may have been kind of heading up against something where hopefully you recognize, oh, there's a little bit of stagnation in me. Oh my gosh, I'm still holding myself back. I'm still making myself small and still playing a little under what my capacity is. Oh, I don't know quite how to fill up the space in my life. Place where we have mistranslated what slowness is asking for. Rather than slowing into a holding, we slow us into stopping. We're going to have to find a different rhythm, find a different understanding. And another thing that we might have been doing accidentally over the last 7 years, rather than taking the full curriculum, is continuing to hide that fear of sensation, that fear of the body, by inputting more control patterns. So rather than using tools to actually understand how to work with our nervous system, we were using tools to understand how to control our dysregulation, control our sensation, control the discomfort. And so that is going to create quite a bit of rub, and you're going to have some tension in yourself if that's where your nervous system work has been. So this is perhaps an invitation to really take this next season to go back to your foundations of your nervous system, to really go back to understanding how to build that container, how to get down deep enough into your baseline where you're really working. Because where we're going in the next 7 years, your nervous system will be demanded upon to hold increased voltage or pressure, to translate more intense light, and to harmonize massive amounts of chaos. And if you're not prepared to do that, if you don't have that resiliency, if you haven't built that muscle, if you don't have a ground to rest upon and a container to be able to direct that kind of voltage and increase pressure, it's going to be really, really hard. Uranus is an awakener, it's a challenger, it's disruptive energy, it's innovative energy, and it will hit us in the places where we are least prepared. It likes a surprise. And so in the places where our controls and our clinging has been, it's going to be like, oh, surprise, you can't do that anymore. Or, oh, surprise, if you keep doing that, this consequence is going to be huge in your life, in your body, in your work, whatever it might be. It's going to be pretty big. For the first time, have this interesting opportunity with evolution. Nervous system work is called evolution for a reason. And it really is about building the nervous system that we need to move into the future. What this next 7 years offers is an opportunity for us to work with both our personal nervous system, but also the collective cosmic nervous system to really understand new ways of innovating through the chaos to bring new coherence and creativity. A nervous system that can be with chaos in a way that it understands how to harmonize it is such a masterful system as a creator because that system can take the raw material of chaos, which is just discoherent energy waiting to be coalesced, waiting to be brought into coherence, waiting to be brought into organization and work with that. And so when you have taught yourself how to do that, when you've learned how to hold yourself and to move energy through your body, move the electricity in your body, work with your nervous system, work with your fascia, work with your body as this harmonizing tool, you are not afraid of the chaos. That doesn't mean you don't have an opinion about it. It doesn't mean that you love it. It doesn't mean that you don't need rest, but you're not afraid of chaos. And the amount of chaos is going to be amplified with this Uranus and Gemini energy. So if you thought that we were in a farcical storyline before, if you thought that chaos was off the charts, I don't know that we've seen anything yet. And that is not a gauntlet. That is not me predicting anything. That is just understanding this energy of chaos that is available with this amount of air and fire in our cosmic weather, with this amount of innovation, disruption, awakening, challenging energy coming through. So if you are uncertain how to move through overwhelm or to center yourself without suppression, control, or dissociation, this is going to be a really great time for you to double down on that mission. So, places we might want to look in our relationship to money, in our relationship to our self concept, like the story that we're holding about ourselves. Of course, we've talked about the nervous system. That's huge. In our ideas of success and leadership, something's wanting to be understood about moving out of that suppression, moving out of the overwhelm around success and leadership, around health and daily life. Those are all big themes. And you might have one that kind of pings more for you of like, oh, right, right. In the macros, I'm doing really well about not suppressing my choices or controlling everything or falling into overwhelm, but there's still places in the daily life that I'm getting off kilter. Right now, those are all kind of themes that would be up. And what do you need to do to, allow this to be a season of completion? Maybe even saying as energy is even going to start shifting, but if you were to take from now until solstice or even now until the next equinox to be like, okay, this is really this place that I need to make sure that I've completed. I've built the ground. My nervous system is getting really, really prepared to be able to hold this new energy and to move at this pace, right? So let's talk a little bit more about Gemini, because Gemini is often misunderstood as just very light, fast, until almost trivial kind of energy. Geminis can get a really bad rap for being gossipy and all kinds of things. But Gemini is a really amazing energy. And there's two really big overlooked aspects of Gemini that most people don't understand at an energetic archetypal level. And that is the energy of the Shakti, which is this electrical feminine energy, and this energy of the messenger, the one who moves between the worlds, the one who can come to the gates, to the thresholds, and actually move messages and energy and even people between the worlds. Those are really big aspects of Gemini that get to be worked with over the next 7 years. So, what does the feminine creative energy need from you? What is the feminine, electric, feminine intelligence? What is it going to ask of you over the next 7 years? And what is the message that needs to be moved between the worlds that's going to take your body, your voice, your intelligence to do it? And those are the kind of the big meta invitation. And we tie that back to what does it mean to be fully human and wholly divine? You could get with that. You could channel around that. You could oracle around that, like moving from big feminine electrical energy and feel into the mercurial aspect of the messenger. It is more of the masculine energy, right? There's a marriage of the masculine and the feminine there. So the electricity of that feminine, and then the masculine ability to direct that as a message between the worlds. It's just juicy, so amazing. But there are a lot of risk and edges, and also shadow that can happen in Gemini. So the risk is that it's very liminal energy. This air energy of Gemini can be very liminal. It just switches on a dime. It can be here, it can be there, it can be all over the place. And so, again, if you are not able to ground yourself in change, if you're not able to find yourself, locate yourself inside of liminal experiences, this could feel very discombobulating and be very disempowering to you. The edge of being a bridge builder. So that means that you have to be in one place and also building towards another, and then be able to cross back and forth between things. Gemini energy is not going to be one where you get yourself so rooted that you're not mobile, that you're not able to be in some fluidity, that you have to cling to things, that you are so locked in. That's not maybe very good patterning for this type of energy. This energy is also asking you to risk going beyond the known, even going beyond the vision that you've had into something that is truly evolutionary, truly revolutionary, that changes everything. This is innovation through the wound. We've been learning about our wound over the last 20 years. Now it's like, well, what are you going to do with all that learning? How can you innovate new ways of being, new ways of belonging, new ways of creation, new ways of engaging, new ways of healing through the wound? And a part of that innovation is around the recovery of the magical child or the wildly whimsical, mythical self. Part of Gemini being able to be between the worlds is that Gemini walks the mythopoetic. It understands how to be in this material realm, but to understanding that it is the symbol of reality. It is pointing us to what is true and what is realer, and it understands the mythopoetic. So there's something to be recovered, to be initiated, to be integrated around the whimsical, mythical self, the magical self that you might have never had an opportunity to be in this life, that you might have forgotten, that you might have traded for what you thought was security and stability and belonging, all of those types of things. This energy is going to be asking you, demanding of you to reclaim that, to remember that. And that's going to bring up these edges, meeting our fears of being misunderstood, the fear of being misinterpreted, having to meet where we self censure so that we're not too different, we're not too weird, only allowing ourselves to let that part out when we think we're with enough people who are like us. When I'm with my spiritual friends, this is the way I am, or when I'm with my work friends, that's the way I am. Like all of those places where you're self censoring and masking, controlling, where you're suppressing to try and control your belief of your own wrongness. I am somehow wrong. And so I need to control that. I need to suppress that. I need to present myself in a certain way because otherwise everyone's going to know how wrong I am. And the feelings of shame that many of us probably carry around that. This is going to require us to be finding coherence in motion. Hopefully, you've been finding coherence in a lot of stillness practice, a lot of going inward. And now it's like, great, so fantastic that you've practiced that. Now let's do it like this. The trickster in Gemini, the sacred full part of Gemini is like, okay, great. So now that you've mastered coherence, sitting still and, looking great in your fancy yoga clothes and all of that kind of stuff, I need you to do it while running up a hill and riding a bicycle and juggling this and all these different ways. So it's about finding it in motion, harmonizing the chaos into creation in motion. So all of these ideas too that we've had where we start the work and then we're like, oh, I need to back out and I need to have a break and I need to retreat and I just have to step out. All of that is really going to be a hard rhythm to sustain. And that you might find if you try and continue that, that you stay out, that you actually can't get back in and that then you're now a casualty of your own curriculum. Again, it's not that it's ever too late for you, but what are you waiting for? Why do you keep backing out of the work? Why do you keep starting and stopping? Why are the distractions and all of the other stuff of survival? Like, why does that get privileged? Why do your stories of how fast or slow you need to go? Like, why is that what matters the most? And so this energy is going to be really asking you to find the coherence in motion, to stop calling the stagnation stillness as rhythm. It's going to be asking us to find cohesive, connective rhythm to allow slowness and fastness to be what they need to be without our personal agendas attached to them. It's going to be ask us to say, like, can you speak while this energy is moving without diluting it, without sort of checking to be how wrong you are, without sort of needing to perfect it and practice it in a way that you feel like you are maintaining your expert status. Gemini and Uranus energy is going to be exposing where you're hesitating, where you're editing, where you're overriding the signal that's true so that you're remaining palatable and in protection that you call safety, because that is the place where all the distortions entering. That is the place where the agenda that wants to take your life, really, to enslave you, that's where that agenda continues to have the power over you. One of the things you can do is check your Chiron or your core wound vocation, your gene keys. So you could look at where Chiron sits in your natal chart. You could also pull up your gene keys, look at where your core wound vocation key is, and then do some contemplation around whatever that energy or that information reveals to you about where you have adopted and adapted the idea that you are wrong, that you are not right, that you are not magical, that you are only allowed if you cut off parts of yourself, hide parts of yourself, suppress parts of yourself, show up in a certain way, do it a certain way. And then how do you start right there with that is my curriculum for innovating a new way of being with myself, of belonging, of expressing what I've learned over the last 20 years about my wound, rather than allowing the wound to continue to stay as this protective mechanism. I need to start innovating through that very tender place. The shadow of Gemini can be very scattering. Just lose it all, right? Attraction city, shiny object syndrome, always chasing, seeking and consuming, not actually receiving, not actually learning, not actually integrating, mistaking stimulation for the work, mistaking stimulation for truth, mistaking stimulation for purpose, being really addicted to shallow information and shallow processing as like coolness, wisdom, and especially if it performs well and others like it. Like you just see this all over social media. Somebody looks like they're giving a great message, but it's like when you start peeling back the layers of who they actually are, you feel their embodiment. You're like nothing there, but they talk a good game and they present it really well. That's all the shadow and shallow side of Gemini. The shadow can be about going so fast or speeding up, but it's outside of rhythm. The shadow of Taurus can be going so slow, it's stagnation. Gemini can be so fast, it's just a blur, but there's no rhythm to it. And that's not supportive either. We can have anxiety, especially sort of existential anxiety. Overinterpretation can be part of the shadow of Gemini. Speaking prematurely, so not moving from discernment and being like, well, that's my truth. That can be a huge shadow of Gemini. Speaking out of both sides of your mouth, gossiping, losing yourself to the noise. All of those are Gemini shadows that can show up. Even if you don't think you have Gemini in your chart, you do. Everyone has all of these archetypes. It just depends on where it's hitting and what it's going to bring up for you. You don't have to call it Gemini. You just might ask, how do I scatter myself? How do I let myself get overstimulated and think it's like my purpose? How do I seek and consume and not actually learn and receive and integrate? Why do I go so fast that then I have to go so slow? Why am I addicted to that patterning and that rhythm? That's not really a rhythm. You can find it without worrying anything about Gemini if you just look for the patterns. Where are you losing yourself to the noise? Where are you getting distracted from your actual curriculum? Where are you not holding your integrity around your word? So Gemini is all about separation or dichotomy. And this can make you or break you because you either become fractured in the separation or you become a bridger of dichotomy, which makes you wholly devoted to wholeness. Right. So you either start seeing all of the fracturing and all of the problems with that, right? And all of the chaos that comes from all of this. And you just get lost and overwhelmed in the amount of separation. You can internalize it so much that all you feel is so alone, so separate, so wrong, so misunderstood, misinterpreted, so unsupported. Or the Gemini energy matures and you're actually able to start seeing the fractals inside of the whole crystal. And you start being able to see how every aspect of separation actually drives us toward a bridging to something else. And it becomes the bridge where we then can hold dichotomy. All truth has dichotomy in this realm. It's one of the laws of this realm is dichotomy, polarity. And so the only way for us to return to wholeness is actually to be able to hold difference bridged, difference in relationship, polarity in relationship, and to become so devoted to finding wholeness that we're not afraid of difference. And that is what this 7-year arc of really being devoted to what is it to be fully human and fully divine. It is this work of Gemini. And I mean, for some of us, this like has been this has been the preparation. And just want to talk really briefly. I want to finish up talking about sacred leadership in this very electric field, because many of us were designed actually for this energy that we're moving into. We're more prepared to serve in what's coming than where we've been trying to serve. And you might have some unlearning, some forgiveness, some undoing inside of that because you've been trying to fit yourself into a different box. You've been trying to operate from a system that you didn't believe in, but you thought you had to in order to get the work done. And then for others of us, there's going to have been a real denial about what it is to have been a leader. We're going to have the continued fall of the guru and the continued outing and fall of the curated, performed leader, the one who is very different on the stage. There's these places, they're called the green room, and that's where you kind of gather with important people, the important person who's come to the show and meet you in the green room, or fans can come in, and there's a different version of you in the green room when you're in this more intimate place where you're like, oh, these are the cool people. And I see this so much in the supposed leadership world where it's like we're really invested in selling this fucking pseudo idea of proximity being transmission and proximity being some type of ability to spark. We've moved from the guru giving you the Shakti put to this idea that your 7-figure coach can give you the Shakti put of your business because you get in the green room with them. And then there's another version of that person who's in the practice room. And so the practice room is where we do the things over and over again. And you will find if you stay with someone long enough, that facade begins to crack. That great message that they gave on that stage and that way that they sold you into the proximity. And then you get into practice with them. And then the day to day hitting the studio and doing the hard work, they can't fucking hang. And they've got no muscles built and actually doing the work. And they can't even talk to what the work is. All they can do is do their rehearsed message and give the mic drop moment that they're so good at doing, but they're not living in any integrity. They're not walking their walk. And that is going to continue to crumble, and that's going to continue to be outed. So any place where we've been pedestaling that, where we've thought we need to be more like those people in order to be successful, that's the place of confrontation for the sacred leader who is here to lead this blooming, blossoming, becoming world through the dark night. You have to meet the place where you thought I needed to do that. I needed to sell people into proximity. I needed to buy into proximity versus actual transmission versus being with people. Proximity, it's not that it's not a thing. Of course, we are influenced. We're in co-regulation. We're in resonance with the people that we come into relationship with, that we work with in these ways. But there's a big fallacy around it. There's a lot of karma around this way that we're selling proximity. There's a lot of karmic ties and trauma bonding inside that way that it's living inside of the coaching, spirituality, self-development world. We need to clean that up. We need to clean up whatever side of the street, for some of us, maybe both sides of the street that we've been on. Alignment, over presentation, over expertise status. So how are you not walking your walk full enough? It doesn't matter if you've got a great message. It doesn't matter if you want to be of service. If you're living like a jerk, if you're out of alignment, if you're being incongruent, if your life is really different off stage than it is on stage. And for a lot of people, on stage is going to be your social media. On stage is going to be when you're with a client or when you're in creation mode. And then you're really different out on the street. You're trend chasing. We're trying to find the next hack into it. So many of us are meant to be leading such deep transformational work. And yet we've gotten caught up in the trend chasing and in trying to offer depth messages with this shallow bullshit marketing. It just like makes no sense. However, we're moving collectively. The energy is moving in support of more depth work, of more of the real work having space to land. Leadership in this energy is not going to be anchored in certainty and to a fixed performed identity and into this pseudo constructed authority where you're like, I've got something to give you, right? I know more than you. Right? All of that's not going to be going so well. It's going to continue to crumble. No, I don't know what time. It's not going to like on, April 20th, the coaching industry is going to crumble if we don't get this together. But there is going to be something about understanding that your leadership has to first and foremost be rooted in truth in your life, not in performance, not in a curation, but are you in alignment to the transmission that you're meant to be carrying? And are you transparent in the process that you live out of your own work? This is about vulnerability, being on display, being available, not being performed on stage. So the proof that you've used about making yourself the expert, like how much money you're making, how many followers you have, like all of that stuff, the clout that we thought it was to build up. I was in this room, this presented expertise thing is not going to be holding. The transmission will need to be felt. Higher wisdom will need to be moving. Your evolutionary edge will have to be evident to stay inside of the field of the sacred leader. And again, so many of us were born for this. So many of us are going to actually, once this energy takes root, once we get ourselves cleaned up, we're going to be like, oh, thank goodness, this is working so much better for me. So do the unlearning, do the cleaning up that you need to so that we can get this field of sacred leadership really clear. For the sacred leader, intuition is going to need to be kinetic. You're going to need to be able to stay in the continuous flow of higher wisdom. Your nervous system's going to need to be able to hold the voltage of the present, of the future, of the energy that's going to need to be transmitted. You're going to need to be able to read the symbols and the signs very fast. You're going to need higher discernment, all of those types of things. So understanding how to embody your intuition, how to stay present with yourself, how to be able to be that bridge between the worlds, really, really important. And you've got 7 years here to practice that. It takes 7 years to come into mastery. So just imagine what you could do with your sacred leadership if you took the invitation to step into this next 7 years as your masterful journey as a sacred leader. It makes me so excited to think of this finally landing, to think of a world where people are stepping into this type of leadership that would thrive from their own lives, but also like what that would roll out into communities, into the world, into all of that. And of course, I believe that we're all called to leadership, and that can look like different scale in terms of outputs, but that the energy of that, of understanding what it is to be in leadership, to me is an organization of our own internal capacities. And also that there's an invitation over this next 7 years that we come fully alive. This electrical field, this real sparking of the nervous system is about like, are you willing to fully live? Are you willing to take the opportunity to be so alive, so open without becoming porous, so responsive without falling into your habitual reactiveness, to like just really let your intuition mature so that you're not just moving from vague feelings or like chasing peak experiences, but that you are living in a moment to moment dialogue between your body, the field, your soul, higher consciousness, the highest timeline for humanity, right? And that you can sense that, you can direct the energy without collapsing. You're not stuck in the second guessing to become a clear channel that does not have to collapse, distort, or hide from what moves through you. There's new archetypes of sacred leadership that are really coming through, and I'm going to be talking more about those the rest of this year, moving into this next 7 year portal. This invitation to really understand ourselves at a core elemental level, understanding what it is to be rooted, to move fluidly with the wind, to move fluidly with water, to be clear as a lightning divining rod, being able to have that work with the fire, and having a nervous system that can really hold that depth, but transmit at speed, shift state at speed, to really become a sacred site of revelation. You become a system that is a sacred site of revelation, of truth. It reminds me of the ancient tradition of Imbos Feroci. My Irish pronunciation is probably not great there, but Imbos Feroci. And it's this way that divine communication that these seers, these warrior poets, these just oracles would open their system in relationship to the land, in relationship to the elements, and have that divine fire drop in and just come into that depth of communication. So Imbos is about inspiration and Feroci is about illumination and looking at what the words mean. And so there's this energy that's about letting yourself come into being inspired, like letting the divine communication come in and then being able to move that into illumination, to become that beacon, that signal, that light into the world. And so that's really what this energy reminds me of. Not that we will be doing Emboss Feroci because we're not. But that's the inspiration that I see, or that's the invitation of our own modern aspect of understanding what that type of ancient practice was. Last thing I want to say is just going back to that piece of the separation. So you've probably heard or know yourself, we're in this splitting of consciousness. That's going to get highlighted and even amplified very clearly in this next energy phase with this energy of Uranus in Gemini. When we look back at times before when Uranus has been in Gemini, there's been wars. When this transit was active, this was when the witch hunts were in the 1600s. There's lots of other things that happened, but there is that kind of volatility here and that way that it can become divisive and can be separated. I remember one of the first trainings I did with Carolyn Mace, and she was talking about this split that was coming. This was I can't remember how many years ago, but what I remember her saying was that people would be looking at the same events, and one would be in the despair for the horror that was happening, and one would be in the utter bliss of what was being birthed. And I think there's more for us to talk about in terms of how we're positioning ourselves and where we're orientating to make sure we're not in the bypass of the reality so that we're not just seeing bliss and beauty as a way of staying out of the moment, but that we're also not in the split in a way where all we see is destruction and horror. And so there's something very interesting about how do we navigate the split without being split ourselves? How do we understand what it is to be in co-creatorship with these energies, with the collective, for our communities, for the legacy we want to leave, for humanity. And it's a big ask. It's a big ask of your life, especially if you've still been rooted into the idea that you're, meant to survive this system that is designed to enslave you and designed to never give you your full power and to never honor you as an authority. Like this is just can be like, oh, this is a lot. So one thing I would just say is if you are further on that journey than your family or your other members of your community, just have the patience or at least the understanding to recognize that they do not understand what you're talking about for the most part because their consciousness has not developed. And I think that's going to become more and more clear. I think one of the biggest splits we're going to start to see very quickly, if you're not already seeing it in your life, is that relating to people whose consciousness is not evolving becomes even harder. And how do we again not use that as a separation that creates more divisiveness, using that as like a bridge towards something? Not that it is ours to do the work for the people, not it is that it is ours to stay with them if they won't do their work, but what becomes the bridge? And so that might be the place where we continue to recognize that inside of the separation of consciousness, one of the roles we can choose to play is that a bridge. And to do that with right boundaries, to do that with discernment, again, to do that with real clarity in ourselves about what are we willing to bridge, where's the bridge going, and how will we carry that and carry ourselves across that. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. Well, there's much more to come. I'm sure we'll be back talking about this quite a bit. But I wanted to sort of lay on some of these pieces, give you an opportunity to feel some of the things, but to most especially take the opportunity to do the check in, to do the really hard work of gleaning the gold from the last 7 to 8 years around where we want our nervous system to have come through, what the integration point, what the completion point is, and that if you are not where you would want to be at that place, to take this as your moment to choose it, to choose to become a container, a system, holy ground that knows how to stay, that knows how to work with your nervous system in a really important way so that you can be available for what's coming and you can be available for your own evolution and the evolution of humanity. All right, that's it for now. I will see you again